Hello, everyone, on the webinar today. I'm happy to welcome you all on this highly interesting webinar and online panel we have today. It's about banking trends in Switzerland and SIC instant payments and beyond. So we have obviously a very highly interesting topics with almost 200 registrations, which is nowadays a very big audience, especially on an online channel. So I'm happy to welcome everyone. First of all, I want to welcome our panelists. We still, as you can see, waiting for Frederic Via from Bottomline, but we have Daniel Capraro from, he's a co-founder and chief product officer at Yapeal, a fintech licensed bank, I would say, even though it's not a complete banking license, but they provide banking services in a very modern fashion. Then we have Bruno Kudermann. He is senior product manager at SIX, and he is the expert on instant payments at SIX. Then we're waiting for Frederic Via. He's director of global marketing at Bottomline Technologies, EMEA. But we wanted to start on time. So and of course, I'm the moderator here. Most of you probably already know me from Twitter and LinkedIn, and I'm happy to be the moderator today. Please, if you have questions, you have the Q&A a link on the bottom of your screen. You just type in your questions, and we'll go through the questions after the session. So we should be aimed to be through after 45 minutes and have still 15 minutes for questions. So please ask the questions via the Q&A. And so let's get started. As we probably are all aware, SIC instant payments will start in 2024. But what we see globally is that 63% of banks and financial institutions picked instant payments as the top priority over the next 12 months, following by fraud detection, cross-border payments, which are 52%, and digital transformation. So I want to ask the panelists, Daniel and Bruno, what are the general trends you see in Switzerland, but also in neighboring countries? I want to understand, where are we in Switzerland when it comes to digital payments or payments in general? And where is Switzerland as a financial center compared to the other countries around us? Daniel, may I ask you to start?
Sure. Thank you very much, Ulf. From my point of view, if we have a look beyond Switzerland in the neighborhood countries, there we see SEPA Instant payment as a good basis. But still, nevertheless, that's instant payment on our days with still end-to-end timing of 10 seconds. So it fulfills the most requirements. But if we think about further payment activities, real checkout payments, then it's still too slow. And from that point of view, if you look then, for example, in faster payments in UK, there you have as well the same situation. You have instant payment not guaranteed in terms that it could go up to 2 hours. And from that point of view, I'm curious as well to see if there are possible payments, account-to-account payments that are really fitting into the stage that they can be used for everyday payment directly online and on a merchant checkout.
Bruno, how is that from your point of view? When you talk about instant, we just learned from Daniel, instant obviously doesn't mean instant in its real sense, so it's more like maybe near time and not real time.
Yeah, instant, whatever it is, I always call it, it's just more RTGS. No, forgive me. I think the trend is clear speed. We have seen that if we look on the tremendous success of Twint with nearly 400 million transactions, it is an instant system, definitely. If you look on SCT Inst, yes, it is in place for about 5 years now, with about 14% market share. So I'm regular user of those initiatives. The trend is clear: speed, independent in which country you're looking on. It's definitely its speed. The key is, and that's what Daniel mentioned: is it end to end? Is it instant clearing? Is it instant settlement? Risk-free in central bank money? That's where the core is. Instant does not mean 100% instant as we see it. And that's the reason why we have the intention to bring instant end-to-end risk-free in central bank money in Switzerland live by this year and in production by next year for all the major banks.
Thank you, Bruno. So that's basically what SIC 5 will bring to Switzerland. In which countries do you already see they have such a setup? I mean, is UK ahead here, or is it Germany? Is it France, or are there some other systems which work already in that fashion?
Daniel, would you like to start, or should I try?
Let's please go on, yours.
I think comparison with other countries is indeed a challenge. Daniel mentioned faster payment. It is in place. It exists. I think we should compare ourselves with SCT Inst from an infrastructure perspective, because we clearly base on SCT Inst, and that is our basic.
Yeah.
So the instant payment in Switzerland is based on the EPC model. It is a classical four-corner model. We have the same 10 seconds, which should be lower, but it's at least 10 seconds. So we base fully, and one ambition was to comply with the market around, because anyway, whatever we do, it is the measure, and you will be compared with SCT Inst. So
Can
I
you
think
quickly explain for those who don't understand SCT Inst, for those people who are not deep into payment infrastructure, etc.? Just quickly what it is, where it comes from. Can you quickly explain, Bruno, SCT Inst, what it means, where does it come from? Because it's obviously important to understand this is the benchmark, and that's what we want to comply with as well in Switzerland with SIC 5.
I think we all know, I know we are all SCTs, as SEPA credit transfer, which is in place for many years now. It is a basic four-corner model, as we call it. It's the payer, the payee, and the two banks involved. For example, Deutsche Bank and Société Générale in France. That is a classical model. You transfer money between those banks, and the European Payments Council has established an instant model, SCT Inst, which has the same basic construct, which means during the SEPA zone, you must be, if you have signed the adherence agreement of SCT Inst. It's not mandatory today. That's what we're going to talk about as well. It's a choice for a bank to participate. Most banks have, but it's not mandatory today. So if a bank joins, she must sign an adherence agreement, which implies that she must be able to at least be reachable or to send transactions. And that's what the devil is. Those seconds apply. The maximum time should be 10 seconds. As a practical example, I regularly use SCT Inst. It's really 1, 2, done. You can really look on your screen on the mobile. It is very interesting. It is. I love it.
Thank you, Bruno. That definitely helps to provide some context. Just had a remark or a comment here on the Q&A. Have to look at Holland as SCT Inst, the new normal. So obviously Holland seems to be quite ahead. You're nodding your head, so you confirm.
Yes, definitely. They have accepted as a community, have agreed to use SCT Inst wherever possible. They have, as well, as far as I have learned, made some special rules. I think it's even higher amount, something like that. So SCT Inst Netherlands, it is a new normal, yeah. And by the way, if we talk about new normal, we talk about customer payments SCT Inst, not about any bank-to-bank payments. So new normal is as well a term which must be interpreted from community to community. That's what we have learned during the SIC 5 project.
Thank you, Bruno. Which leads me to the next question. So obviously Holland leading, other countries maybe nearly there. What is the potential now for SIC 5 from your point of view, representing a bank in that sense, Daniel?
From our point of view, it's a really great starting point to make the end-to-end payment available 24/7, which is not the case today. That is only possible with closed loop activities, and from that point of view, it's really great starting point. I think we need to figure out how fast traditional banks can adopt these payment methods as well, that they have a real end-to-end journey in this similar.
Yeah, we will talk about these implementation challenges later on. Where
exactly.
do you see the big potential? Before we heard B2C. Thanks, Bruno, for your clarification. So basically, the consumer side or the bank, the customer side. What does it mean in that sense? But also, how is it for B2B or maybe B2B2C? Any comments from you, Daniel? Maybe to continue on that question or expand the question?
Well, yeah, I think that's as well something that is then, and really, if we do then a direct settlement on every transaction, and that this is then the real account-to-account payment, I think that is then for sure the next step. As we have now learned, Twint is heavily used in everyday usage. And if we are able then to do a direct settlement, that brings a lot of benefits as well for all the participants. So it's directly settled. If I'm a merchant, I directly can use the money. So it shortens up there as well the messages from the dual messaging system to a single messaging system.
Any addition to this, Bruno?
No, I think
do you see now, are you focusing now very much on the B2C side, so the banks looking at providing this service to their to the consumers basically, so to the private customers, individual customers, or is it also very strongly for B2B cases?
We are an infrastructure provider, and that's one of your questions later on. SIC builds the foundation. So, and if one of the participants had the chance to listen to the national bank's comments a few days ago during the apero, we are building the foundation. It's about risk-free transfer of interbank. That's what Daniel mentioned. So that's our focus. We don't focus on end-to-end customer, because that's the private sector. So we focus on the railway. I always compare it with, we don't build the Teslas, we just build the highway that Tesla can ride on. And that's what Daniel mentioned. It's risk-free transfer. It is the interbank settlement which must be risk-free. That's where we focus on.
I think that's also important for the audience to understand the role of SIC in that space, and that basically the banks then have to provide the, let's say, the last mile to the customer.
It is indeed.
Yeah. Now we're still waiting for Frederick. I think he would probably be able to answer on this side as well. But we will continue as it goes. I see there are also comments coming in. I just heard that Danske Bank in Denmark provides a local standard for instant payments used by Danish residents, which also obviously makes clear it's a very domestically driven initiatives now. So we basically implement complying with what's given in the EU or our neighboring countries, but it's still very much domestic. So, but I understand, me as a user now, me as Urs Bolt, using, let's say, Revolut, paying to N26, it's literally coming within the same second. Is that built on the same infrastructure? And I can imagine Daniel knows exactly what I'm talking about. Is that basically, let's say, the goal maybe of the modern financial services providers to provide that settlement on the sender side of a payment and the receiver side?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's really a great example how SIC Inst works currently, and that covers as well when the first mile, so the sender bank, and the receiver bank, the last mile, is as well digitized purely, and they are able then to process those payment requests and payment receives instantaneous. Then you have this great customer experience. And now this enables really great other opportunities in directly online checkout possibilities based on a international standard.
I remember when we prepared our panel today, Daniel, you mentioned a few use cases. Can you maybe go a bit deeper and provide such an example of a use case, and maybe also what are maybe the criteria of a business case you look at?
Yeah, absolutely. So what we did, we encountered that real-time payment currently is only possible if we do that in a closed loop manner, in terms that we're using the Yapeal payment capabilities as in-house. So we need a merchant to have a Yapeal account and the client itself. So that could be very attractive for some scenarios like we have implemented with online casinos. They are regulated in terms that they only being able to pay out to a Swiss IBAN, and that usually takes days. Usually you play during the evening, during the weekend, and if you have won or you have played enough and you would like to receive the money that's left, that's something you can't do with the current setup of the traditional banks instantaneous. And that's exactly a case where we enabled then the casinos to have an account at Yapeal, do an instant payment, and the recipient gets it instantaneously. And from that moment on, he can spend the money with the card, with any other payment rails, but he has the money received instantly. And this is one of the use cases. And you could think about in wider scales in terms that this only can not be used in a one-to-one relationship like this example with the online casino. You could imagine that there we could build as well a payment ecosystem, which is built then on these closed loop payment rails. But this is just the current setup. With SIC 5, we become then the situation that it hopefully is enabled through every participant in SIC, and that would make those payment networks even more valuable for those use cases.
Given that, of course, then the bank or the financial services provider implements that also in their, let's say, online banking app, digital banking app, correct?
Absolutely.
Like you did it now in the closed loop for that interesting case.
Absolutely, and therefore you need to solve the last mile that you are able to receive it 24/7. Yeah.
I think
very interesting. Bruno, yes.
Daniel has mentioned a very important thing. It's a closed loop today, as you mentioned with the casino. We build that on behalf of the financial community, and with the mandate of National Bank, it will be just for those who are not familiar with Switzerland. The SIC system is the Swiss interbank system and settles mass payments and high value payments within one system. That is a specific feature within Switzerland which does not exist in other countries. So we have a central system. We will expand that, which is based on RTGS today, interbank, end-to-end, and not a closed loop. It is interoperable. So it is risk-free money transferred, interoperable, so that any participants, and we talk about a potential of 300 participants, which covers all banks in Switzerland, will be able to do such services intra-bank and interbank. So that's the key. It's not only a closed loop.
Yes, exactly. With SIC 5, that's coming. So let's talk quickly about the timeline, Bruno. So when is what to be happen? So when exactly do banks need to be ready with this? So it's obviously regulatory, it's mandatory. Can you maybe provide some light on the timelines and what needs to be done by what?
Happy to do so. So from a project perspective, let's just go on and differentiate between the project and the bank side. From a project perspective, we will deliver the testing environment by July this year. We will go live technically by November this year. We have about 5 or 6 pilot banks. And as we do not talk about a separate system, it is an enhancement of the system, though there is no new contract necessary and requested. All banks must use instant payments as a SIC participant if they use customer payments. That is a precondition. So, and this obligation applies to all banks at the latest by November 26. But for those banks who have more than 500,000 incoming customer payments, this obligation applies by August 24. That's the date which is often mentioned as instant payments will be implemented by August 24. It is the obligation for those, let's call it bigger banks, which cover about 96% theoretically of customer payments. So as in other systems as well, we have big participants, we have small participants with lesser volume, and compared with other countries, the SIC system has a policy of direct participation. So we're not like in the UK, they have about 12 or 15 direct participants. The other ones are indirect connected. We don't know that. So that is the reason why we always talk about IP will be in place by August 24. And that's where the bigger banks must be at least reachable.
The 500,000 payments threshold is yearly payments, or is that?
It was defined on the basis of 2020. That's at the time when the National Bank has defined that obligation. It was a threshold. It won't be changed. On the other hand, we have about 20% more banks who want to join by August 24 than obliged. So
this would then be the 96 banks, as you mentioned.
Yeah, we will have about 70 banks, which is about 15 more than are obliged to do so. But the percentage of theoretically possible, that's what's interesting for the market. What then you're interested, which counterpart is about 97% of theoretically reachable customer payments. Not
the whole volume of the
of the whole volume. Not meaning that automatically those payments will be converted to instant payments. So
of course.
And between November 23 and August 24, it will be more a friends and family phase, so a ramp up during that phase.
Thank you, very interesting. I'm happy to welcome Frederic on this panel. Great, you joining us as well. You hear us? Hi, Frederic.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So first, I really apologize. I had an technical issue to join the session. So I'm sure that you covered a lot of ground already. So again, apologize and good morning, everybody.
Thank you, Frederic, for joining. So we were already discussing now about the details, when comes what, the timelines, etc. I think we can now definitely go into a deep dive. I wanted to ask, you already learned the role of SIC in this, like I would say almost like a railway system, but the infrastructure among the banks. But what is actually the role of a technology solution provider like Bottomline is? When you look at that, you basically have SIC as the infrastructure provider, but the banks have to implement that to provide an end-to-end connectivity and then really instant real-time payments.
Yeah, sure. So I think that the first thing is we have to provide to the marketplace the connectivity to these new environments. So to be able to manage the life cycle of the messages that have to be exchanged to ensure that there is this instant payment processing being made accordingly. And then we have also the first thing is really about connecting, so technically connecting to the environments, to the instant payment environments. The second thing is to manage the end-to-end message processing. Then when you send a payment, then you have to acknowledge the response and so on. There is a quite predefined process end-to-end to manage that. And then we have also to ensure that the service is available on a 24/7 basis. So to make sure that we can run on this expectation, to be sure that we can cope with the 10-second as well, and to be sure that we can integrate in the orchestration chain our services, so connectivity, but also potentially to be the orchestrator and to call some external systems such as the liquidity management system or sanction screening system. So there is a lot of things that we have to do all the time in the context of a 24/7 availability on an ultra speed requirement. So it's about enabling the bank to rely on these, I would say, last mile component to make the message processing with SIC being successful. And of course, at the backend part, we have to discuss with the backend provider. I don't want to give names, but let's say the major one in Switzerland, to make sure that we can integrate the message processing with their system to make sure that the processing end-to-end, from, let's say, credit to debit, from one account to the account, in and out, is managed properly and is meeting the expectation in terms of time, in terms of timing and availability as well.
When you say backend, you mean like the Avalogs or Temenos and Finovas, so the core banking solutions, correct?
Yeah. So we have to discuss with them because we need to understand what kind of integration we will have together, the API that we will use, the content that we will exchange, the way we will interact, and to ensure that we have this availability which is running, and also to make sure that who is in charge of the orchestration. Because when you have an instant payment, then you have to make sure that this is a valid account. You need to make some sanction screening. Then you need to send to receive the response. You have to notify if you are not available at that time. So there is a lot of things that you need to orchestrate. So we need to define who will be the master in terms of orchestrations to make sure that only one will take the decision about the timing, the timeout, if there is a timeout to be processed, and this kind of thing. So it's really about integrating the connectivity piece, the message management piece with the backend system, and also the surrounding system which are taking part to the processing chain.
Thank you, Frederic. So Daniel, I mean, I look at you now. You got a top modern, let's say, banking platform. I mean, how was that built, or what's the design or your architecture you looked at to basically already being able now to do closed loop instant payments in real time? How was that already part of your design choices when you started to build the bank?
Yeah, thanks. We had the opportunity in 2018 when we founded Yapeal that we really started greenfield. And based on that, for us, it was clear that we would like to use most modern technology. Based on that, we choose an approach that it's a pure microservice architecture built on a public cloud so that we are able to easily scale. And that moment when we introduced that, it was pretty unique. I think still running everything in a public cloud is something that many banks feared in that timing, but it was then easily to negotiate that with the regulator. So from that point of view, we didn't have any issues at all. We profit a lot from the flexibility of this modular approach that we used. And I think based on the agility that we have as a startup, that is a really cool base. And we build always Yapeal in the sentence that Yapeal is kind of a platform, and we are just using it as Yapeal for ourselves as first client, but we are happy as well to leverage it for other purposes.
What does that mean? Other purpose, like let's say, could be institutions or let's say companies. Obviously, understanding your major shareholder is in the business of small and medium-sized businesses, right? Is that going like to provide this infrastructure then?
Well, there are two kind of possibilities. One is that you embed the platform, which is purely based on APIs, that you could embed that as embedded finance, one of these, most popular.
As a use case, yes,
Exactly.
exactly.
And so that you bring in terms of banking as a service, all the parties which are not regulated or not are willing to participate in this regulation scope in the area, that they can provide financial services in their ecosystem. That's one possibility. We see there as well, together with our strategic investor, Abacus, the great opportunity in terms of making the flows of the goods and the payment rails synchronous, so that we have the really autonomous live accounting, so that the accounting system can go into real time as well. This is what all CFOs are looking for, so that they do not have the discrepancy between what's in our books and what is really financially already processed. And then for sure, using the Yapeal technology as a SaaS, that's another option that we are considering, and we are in many talks with. So that
very
was
interesting, Daniel. Yeah, very interesting. So I think that's the dream of every treasurer or liquidity manager of a company. When I look back to my far out past, I mean, it makes it even more important what Frederick mentioned, that you need technology solutions which actually enable that for traditional bank and existing infrastructure. So interesting, there was a poll done ahead of this panel today. I want to quickly go through this. So there was a poll question, with the question to be answered, what is your financial institution's most significant barrier to the adoption of SIC Instant payments? So the results there were three answers coming out, responses. So by far the biggest barrier was mentioned: cost and hassle of implementing a new payment rail, which was answered by 50% of the respondents. Then legacy infrastructure, not surprising, and lack of IT resources and prioritization to implement that was 25%. So legacy and lack of resources prioritization were both 25%. By far was basically the cost and the challenge to implement a new payment rail at 50%. How do you see that, Frederick? I mean, the answers, are you surprised? Is this what you would have expected? Or do you miss maybe other responses?
No, I'm fine. I think first it's interesting because when we had this kind of questions in the Euro environment, so for SEPA Inst, the answer was the other way around. So it was more the main hurdle was more the legacy infrastructure and let's say the lack of IT. When we are here, it seems that this is the cause. I think this is also about the maturity of the marketplace and the fact that Switzerland is a mature market and there is no fragmentation inside the market. So the payment system is working well already, I would say. It has proven that it can work on ultra-stress conditions. It is very fast, very efficient. I think this is the reason why the focus is more on the cost, because we will need to find, the marketplace will need to find a real benefit of that for the customers, to find new revenue streams which can be built on top of that. On top of that, Switzerland is already in ISO 20022 standard compared to many other countries which are moving to ISO. So we were already there with the rich data and all of that. So the maturity was maybe not making that as a must-have immediately. However, I would say that moving ahead, if the Swiss marketplace wants to remain competitive and really cutting edge as it has always been, I think we need to stimulate let's say the industry to move towards these new paradigm, which are really instantaneity, 24/7 availability, and all of that. So I think we have to upgrade a bit the marketplace, not because it's not working, but because it's for the future. I would say the needs in the future, the customer experience, the new generation of people will need to have a much more, let's say, immediacy of everything they do. They will need to have reporting, mobile app, and so on. So I think it's about, let's say, making a step further to upgrade the environment, even if immediately the need is not so big because the marketplace is working fine. So I think it's more about preparing and building the future that's really meeting an immediate needs compared to other countries where payments can be really slow. I don't want to blame anyone, but if you don't use a faster payment in the UK, the payment can be very multiple days to be credited. So I think there is a difference, which is probably linked to the Swiss marketplace, which is quite massive. The last point is that if ultimately the payment world across the planet, cross-border payment, want to reach this paradigm of near real-time, even for cross-border payment, you will need to have at the beginning and at the end a market which is able to process a payment in an instant way to be part of the chain. So if we want to stay included in this big picture by providing the last mile in instant payment, then we have to move to this instant payment. So again, it's not about really changing something which is required right now, but it's preparing the future, enabling Switzerland as being the endpoint for instant payment cross-border, and building a new generation of services that will be required and are already required by the new generation.
Thank you, Frederick. Yeah, that's certainly extremely important also for the financial center to remain competitive. And we go to the next question. There was also one I see in the Q&A, which probably goes into this. There was another poll question. It was, how ready are you to verify the IBAN, beneficiary, and daily control on sanctions list? Again, 3 answers. 70% just started planning for such features and compliance, and others, 20%, are waiting for further guidance, and 10%, though minority, 10% are ready. Probably these 10% are the ones which probably make 80% of the volume, I would say, Bruno. You would agree with that, possibly?
No, I think that question stems out of the proposal for the EU regulation. They have made the proposal to make sanction screening on a daily basis. I cannot comment to that really, but these checks are important if you talk about instant payments, because we have the 10 seconds or even less. EPC states that the majority of transaction is done within 5 seconds. So it's a very, very short time frame that we have for instant payment and for such checks. The infrastructure itself does not make an obligation because it's the responsibility of our participants. So, but what we see is that there might be a differentiation between, if you talk about SIC Inst, that checked by every transaction, to a daily procedure. I can only say that I have seen responses from banking communities who doubt if that might be effective or not. So I cannot comment directly on that. For Switzerland, the infrastructure itself as a project does not give any recommendation or obligation for any checks. It is up to the banks who must comply with the regulatory requirements.
Which are already in place anyway for the
which are in place for anything else, exactly. Yeah, but it must be done faster. The challenge is faster.
Right. Frederick, what? Yes.
Yeah, so I completely agree with Bruno. And good morning, Bruno. I think long time we haven't seen. Yeah, I agree with Bruno. This is something which has been proposed at the European level, because they would like to replace sanction screening, which is to their view generating too many false positives. And then in order to avoid that, they will replace this sanction screening filtering on real-time payment by something different, which is a combination of a daily, let's say, KYC filtering on the customer base, plus an IBAN pay verification. So this is something which is a bit more specific for the EU. In Switzerland, we have a different way of doing things, so it's much less regulatory driven usually in Switzerland compared to in other countries. So I think this new way of checking the name and something like that is something that will be what probably will come in the near future, especially for the cross-border payment. But there is a lot of questions around that. Who is managing the registry of check that you would like to do? How do you connect to that? So, but there is an example in the UK where they have this confirmation of pay service, which is based on the same principle. So you make a call to verify the IBAN and the pay account number, and then you can initiate a payment. So let's see if it's a better solution or it's something which take off in terms of a process to work around some of the pains that sanctions to some extent can give, due to the fact that in instant payment you cannot release manually a message. So if you have a payment which is suspicious, in cross-border it is put in an exception queue, then you will review the hit, is it a real hit or not, and then you can release the message, so you don't have the problem about booking and things like that. In instant payment, obviously you don't have enough time to make this manual control, so the response from the sanction screening will be yes or no, because you don't have enough choice, other choices to manage that. And then in that case, let's say the experience will show how it is efficient and if it's generating too many false positive or rejection. Keeping in mind that in Switzerland, for instant payment, we will stay in the, I would say, closed user group where banks know very well each other. They have this compliance filtering already in place. So this is not really about cross-border where you don't know exactly where your payment is going. Here in the Swiss marketplace, it's a closed user group, so we know the rules and things like that. So I expect that maybe we'll have not so many false positives because the system are already tuned for the Swiss marketplace. But let's see, as the experience will show if sanction cause an issue in terms of too many false positives, too many rejection, yes or no. I think this is something that experience will show in the future.
Thank you, Frederic. There was one comment or question in the Q&A here from Luca Beretta. If bank will fall to apply 100% instant payments for AML, KYC, internal checks, or management decision do not accept the entry of funds, will there be penalties like fees, or if yes, are they charged by whom? Or risk to be excluded from the system? I think part of it you already answered, I believe, Frederic. But maybe you just can complete. The question is now here on the main panel.
Should I try?
Bruno, if you, yes, please.
I thought it was one question for you, Bruno.
Very interesting, and Luca, long time no see. I can only say. Let me just read the question again. Applies 100%. Okay. From an infrastructure perspective, a payment has a maximum life cycle of 20 seconds. What about talk about 10 seconds? But we all know that the payment has a maximum life cycle of 20 seconds. So, and the service will definitely kill the payment, put it to be frank, after exactly 20 seconds.
Independent of any checks?
Independent, whatever happens. If there is no response from the beneficiary bank, the service will delete or annulate that payment. So with information to both participants, then the sender bank and the receiving bank. So if Yapeal would try to send Luca 100 Swiss francs via instant, and he will give no response, the payment will be cancelled for whatever reasons. So in any way, the obligation that the participant has is to reply with a positive or negative response. That's the obligation. So and the rest, whether there will be penalties if there isn't 100% responded. To be honest, we had that discussion a few years ago, and Frederick mentioned that we don't have a tendency to make regulatory approaches from the beginning on. We're going to see. We think that banks will do their best to comply with those regulations as they do today. We don't expect to foresee penalties or exclusion. We're going to see.
I mean, the biggest part is already done ahead of the whole, let's say, payment instructions.
Yeah, but it is challenging. We all know that the checks are at the beneficiary banks. That's when we talk to banks. It is challenging. Yeah, Frederick, I think you would agree, and Daniel, it is a challenging part.
Absolutely, and we have also to keep in mind that there is a part of the instant payment processing which is post-processing. So when the messages is completed, the exchange is completed, you still have a few things to do to inform the customer, things like that, which is not part of the 10 or 20 seconds. I would say, I mentioned at the beginning when I finally succeed to join, that we are managing the end-to-end message lifecycle. And this is what Bruno said. So when you have this communication and being open, then depending on the response that you receive, you have to inform the backend system, you have to manage the type of response. So it's about the acknowledgement generation of management, whatever it's positive or negative. So this is where we have also the various, let's say, use case where we have to manage, or if we receive a tax 002 with this information, blah, 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 then it means that the system is not available or we have a problem. Then we have to send a message back to the backend applications to say it has not been taken into account and so on. So this use case in terms of what happens if my message is too long, too late, too whatever, wrong format, or whatever. This is all the use case that we have to manage, and then to make the bridge between SIC, the infrastructure, and the backend application. And this workflow of messages is something that can be managed by us, a financial messaging provider, but it's something that can be also shared with the backend system or completely managed by the backend system. So we have several designs depending on the ability of the backend system to manage the various acknowledgements coming from the various use cases that you can have in this exchange of messages for a single payment.
Yeah, and alternatively, of course, we have new players like Yapeal, some others which are now having fintech licenses, or at least we're announcing that they get, who might be providers. So we're already in the middle of a Q&A. I think I just highlight the next question, which comes from Christophe Bond. Will Switzerland have to implement the future new instant payment standard that will need to be implemented in the EU through the instant payments regulation, considering that Switzerland is in the SEPA area? So that probably goes into what we discussed early on in the panel. We will comply with what's already standard in the EU. But maybe, Bruno, you want to kick that off, and Daniel can hopefully add to it as well.
Yeah, I expected, to be honest, also I expected exactly that question. It is a regulation. It is a regulation which does not automatically apply to Switzerland from a pure legal point of view. I think there is nothing at it. It is a regulation. So we are focusing to bring instant payments as we have designed it today, based on SIC Inst, into Switzerland. The fact, I think the EU proposal has 4 core elements, as far as I have learned. One is the pricing, which is a part of the infrastructure. One is the mandatory participation, which we automatically have by August 24, because we have 98% of all customer payments being reachable as instant payments. So there is no need for additional legislation. The obligation for sending, that's what the proposal does as well. That's an obligation that we don't know today. That will be market practice. Every Swiss bank sends payment via the system. So that will be the new normal, if we will call it like that. So I think there will be an automatic shift, but there is no need. So we have a different starting point as the SEPA zone, and Switzerland is a part of the SEPA zone, but the regulation doesn't automatically apply to Swiss banks.
Thank you, Bruno.
Question answers
Let's jump into the next one, unless
Just one,
maybe
just
Frederick, yes.
one complement on that, because it is mentioned the standard. I think the standard, yes, we know it's ISO 20022, it's an XML-based standard, probably very close between Switzerland and Europe, but I would say the rule book will be slightly different, because in Switzerland you have a specific limit, you have to be a payment in CHF, and so on and so on. So the rules that have to be implemented for SEPA Inst will have some differences by nature, because this is not the same limit, not the same currency, and few other details. So the standard in itself will be the same, let's say the structure of the message, but inside the message, some controls will be most probably different when sending, because the rules to be applied across the EU are slightly different compared to the rules which are applied in Switzerland.
Yeah, thanks, Frederick, for mentioning that. That was obvious for me, because I only live in the Swiss franc world for many years. But for those who are not directly confronted with this marketplace, yes, we have by nature a different specific, and the most one is the currency. So it's not euro, it is Swiss franc. It is technique-wise or structure-wise based on SIC Inst from the message flow. But we have our own Swiss specification for ISO 20022 messages. For example, we don't have different implementation guidelines for instant payments or schemes. It is the same PAX 008 if we talk about RTGS or IP. We even use PAX 009 in the IP service for transferring from the RTGS service to the IP service. So, as I mentioned, instant payment is not a separate system. It is a separate service, but it is a part of the central banking infrastructure. That is a different starting point that we have.
Thank you, Bruno. And we have another question here, which might just expand the one we discussed. So the consequences of ISO 20022 and open banking. Will the standards and protocols be updated? Will we see Blink introduced in WebSockets? Now, I don't understand what Blink is, but I'm sure you know that already. Who wants to jump on this? And Daniel, you jump in when it comes to the open banking part. I'm sure you can also give an answer. But who wants to start off this discussion about the ISO 20022?
I just could guess that it is B-Link.
I think it must be.
Okay, now it's clear. Must be B-Link, exactly. So I just used to the.
I was puzzled.
I know B-Link, of course, but see, I was taken away just by writing it this way. Sorry for that, Johan. It wasn't intended. It wasn't a punch on you. But yes, let's discuss this. That might be definitely important for some people to understand.
So maybe I can just give a few words and then I can hand over. So I would say open banking, so it depends on how we consider that. Is it open banking between different applications, meaning able to share some information and data across multiple applications, or is it the PSD2-like environment, which is about for customers who wants to give access to some of the data, then you can consolidate the view on various accounts to have a single visibility. And then within PSD2, you can also initiate a payment from an account, meaning that instead of having PayPal and a credit card, you will have PayPal, credit card, and do you want to debit these accounts to pay these things, which is a bit the basis of PSD2. So of course, the standards behind that are around about ISO 20022. I say for us, bottom line, in terms of providing the connectivity to the scheme and things like that, we come behind this first step of open banking. So the first step is more at the e-banking level, the banking level, the mobile phone level, towards the end customer that is applying this open banking discussion. Then when it has been initiated, then there is a payment, which might be a standard payment or instant payment that we will manage. What we can see is that this open banking will probably drive more usage of instant payment because it goes well together. So if you trigger the payment from an account, you expect that to have your money being sent immediately to the other way, to the payee.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
I need to jump ahead. We have some more questions. The next one, that one about instant payments. So for crypto firms, I will come to that next, even though I'm highly interested in this. Next question is Switzerland going to be linked to TIPS? Yes or no? Bruno or Frederic or Daniel?
The target instant payment service. Well, by nature, technique-wise, TIPS is SIC Inst in euro, we are Swiss francs. So we talk about two separate services. As far as I'm concerned, TIPS is a system according who treats SIC Inst in euro with its participants. The project, the TIC5 project, focuses on the implementation of Swiss franc, of instant payment in Swiss franc for SIC participants. So that what was a clear mandate that we have received. We receive sometimes the question, what will be happening with interlinking, etc. We are basically looking on those initiatives. There are some initiatives for the G20, for example. There are projects like Nexus, etc. We basically look on those initiatives. But the project clearly has a mandate: implement and deliver the Swiss franc service by November 23. That's where we focus on, and everything else is future.
Thank you, Bruno. Next question. Will there be a Euro SIC instant payment? That's probably another one which Bruno, Frederic can answer, or maybe Daniel, I don't know. But we just go for a quick answer here because I have just 2 minutes left.
Yeah, the same response. Focus is first Swiss franc. That's where more than 100% of our workforce goes into, actually, because that is the goal. And everything else is, let's call it future. Yeah. We're gonna come back to that.
Thank you, Bruno.
I would say on the long term, this is probably something that will come, because we will really need to reach the paradigm which is cross-border instant payment. I talked a bit about that. So if he wants to interlink a payment in euro from Switzerland, then you will have to bridge the two systems, with the last mile being in an instant payment environment. Maybe exactly. It will be not be 10 seconds, but maybe 15. So we will be near real time instead of pure real time. But this interlinking between the various systems is something that will obviously come. But as Bruno said, this is not the mandate today, but we can imagine that in the near future, we will have this kind of interlinking available.
Yeah. I think the next question will lead into this. We know now.
It is the same. Yeah, it is the same.
Yeah. So the beauty is that obviously solution providers like Bottomline Technologies are able to support this when it needs to be done. Correct, Frederic?
Yeah. So and we can connect to both. So we can connect to,
exactly,
because in Europe, so you have multiple instant payment schemes in various countries. SEPA Inst is to have something which is the extension of SEPA, to have something which is across the EU, and then it's about having TIPS, which is, let's say, in central bank money direct, so with a settlement which is real time, compared to RT1, which is another option, and you have STEP, which is another option. So you have different market provider providing instant payment on the same standard in order to make any account in the EU reachable via instant payment. But you will still have different provider. TIPS is the one which is backed by the the European Central Bank, but you have others who are managing different IBANs. So if you want to being able to connect to any account in the EU, probably you will have to connect to TIPS for having a certain group of customers, and then you will need maybe to connect to RT1 to have the other set of customers, and maybe a third one. So, but it is about making that interlink and making able to reach any account in the EU in an instant payment way.
Thank you, Frederic. So the last one was addressed to Bruno. I'm not sure how you want to answer this, Bruno. How could crypto firms also participate or offer instant payment services?
Well, that is a question only the Swiss National Bank can respond to, because we talk about the central banking system of the Swiss National Bank. And the requirements for participating in the SIC system, independent, I mentioned it's not a separate system, it is a part of the SIC system, a separate service, is described and can be found on our website. So I suggest having a look on the website, and in case of you would not find that, just drop me an email. I'll guide you.
Thank you. That's a very good answer, Bruno. I think we're getting to the close, and I thank you really all in this panel, Daniel, Frederick, and Bruno. And also from my side, it was very, very informative and also educational. I hope if you have any questions, you know who to reach out. We can all be found on LinkedIn. Or you will follow Fintech News and will probably get an article about this, I hope, and whatever. I'm looking forward to another opportunity about these highly interesting topics and wish you all a great day. Thank you.